There is a moment in almost every grant-supported project where the real decision gets made, and it is not the moment you press submit, it is the moment you choose the company that will actually do the work. The grant is only money, the project is what that money buys, and the provider you pick is the one who decides whether you end up with something your business genuinely uses or an expensive thing sitting unused in a corner. Owners often agonize for weeks over the paperwork and then choose a vendor in a single afternoon on the strength of a recommendation and a tidy-looking quote, which is precisely the wrong way round. So in the next few minutes, we are going to slow that decision down and walk through how to choose a solution provider for a grant-supported project with clear eyes. One important note before we begin, this channel is educational only. We are not a government agency, we are not affiliated with or endorsed by Go Business Enterprise Singapore or any government body, and nothing here is official advice. We also do not recommend, endorse, or have any relationship with any provider at all. Which schemes involve listed providers and what conditions apply differs by scheme and changes over time. So we will stay with judgment rather than specifics and always point you back to the official source, gobusiness.gov.sg, to confirm what is current for your situation before you rely on any of it. Why this choice matters more than the form. It helps to see where the risk actually sits. An application is a document, and a document can be corrected, resubmitted, or improved. A provider relationship is months of your team's time, your data, your processes, and your money, and it is far harder to undo. If the application is wrong, you lose some effort. If the provider is wrong, you can lose the whole project and be left with a system nobody wants to touch. Yet the attention owners give to each is usually inverted because the form has a deadline and feels urgent, while the vendor choice feels like something you can settle later. The honest ranking is the other way around. The paperwork decides whether you get support, the provider decides whether the project was worth doing. So give this decision the weight it deserves and give it that weight early before you are committed and in a hurry. Zijn finished with this month. Zijn we verbatim meanings via much meaning banking even more furniture brand best mean persona. The most common mistake is going shopping before you know what you are shopping for. An owner hears that support exists, starts talking to vendors, and lets the conversation define the project, which means the project quietly becomes whatever that vendor happens to sell. The healthier order is to write down your problem first, in your own words, before you speak to anyone. What is slow? What is manual? What breaks? What is costing you? What would be different if it were fixed? That short description is your brief, and it does two things at once. It lets you judge whether a provider is actually addressing your situation or steering you to their standard package, and it stops you from buying a solution to a problem you did not have. Providers are good at describing what they do. Only you can describe what you need, so bring that to the table rather than expecting to find it there. Check the official listings first. Some schemes involve providers or solutions that are listed through official channels, and where that applies, it matters, because using a provider outside those arrangements can affect whether the work is supported at all. We are deliberately not going to tell you which schemes work that way or what the conditions are, because that differs by scheme and changes over time, and a general video is exactly the wrong place to learn it. What we will say is that this is a question you should ask before you fall in love with a vendor, not after. Go to the official source, look up the scheme you are considering, and understand how providers fit into it. If a provider tells you they are listed, approved, or preferred, that is a claim to verify on the official channel rather than accept on trust. Doing this early costs you an hour. Doing it late can cost you the support entirely. When the pitch leads with the grant, pay close attention to how a provider opens the conversation because it tells you what business they are really in. When the first thing you hear is about the funding, how much you can get, how they will handle the paperwork, how the grant makes it nearly free, you are being sold the subsidy rather than the solutions. A provider who is confident in their work leads with the work, what it does, who it is for, why it fits your problem, and treats any support as a secondary detail you would confirm officially. The reason this signal is so useful is that a business built around the grant has an incentive to fit you to the scheme, while a business built around the product has an incentive to fit the product to you. Only one of those leaves you better off after the money is spent. So listen for what comes first and let that ordering tell you something. Look at the work, not the sales deck. Every provider has a polished deck, and a deck proves nothing except that they can make one. What actually tells you something is evidence of the work itself. Ask to see it. Ask for examples of similar projects for businesses roughly like yours, in your industry or at your scale, and ask what happened afterwards rather than just what was delivered. Ask for references you can call, and then actually call them and ask those references the awkward questions: what went wrong, what took longer than expected, would you hire them again? A provider who has done good work is usually glad to point you at it, while one who deflects towards the deck is telling you something without meaning to. You are not trying to catch anyone out, you are simply trying to replace a promise with a track record, because a promise is easy to make and a track record has to be earned. We ask what happens after go live. The question owners most often forget is what life looks like once the project is finished, and it is the question that decides whether you are happy in a year. Delivery is the beginning of ownership, not the end of it, so ask what happens next, who trains your team and how much, who fixes it when it breaks and how fast, what ongoing costs are there and are they in the quote or waiting outside it, what happens when you need a change. A provider who has thought about this will answer easily because they support real customers and know exactly what that looks like. A provider who has not will be vague, and vague is your answer. The projects that quietly fail rarely fail at delivery. They fail 3 months later when nobody knows how to use the thing and nobody is coming to help. So make that period part of the conversation before you sign. Always compare more than one. Talk to more than one provider. Always, even when the first one seems perfect. This is not about squeezing the price, it is about calibration. Until you have heard 2 or 3 approaches to your problem, you have no way of knowing what is normal, what is ambitious, what is overpriced, or what is missing. A second conversation regularly reveals that the first provider left out something important, or that the step you assumed was necessary is not, or that there is a simpler way to get most of the benefit. Comparison also changes you as a buyer, because by the third conversation, you ask sharper questions and hear the differences more clearly. Give each provider the same written brief, so you are comparing like with like rather than comparing sales styles. And be honest with yourself about why you like one. If the reason is that they were friendly, that is a nice quality and a terrible criterion. A quote is not a price tag, it is a description of what you are buying, and it deserves to be read as carefully as any agreement. Look at what is included and, more importantly, what is not, because the gaps are where surprises live. Is training in there? Is data migration? Is support? Or licenses? Is the work broken into stages with something to show at each? A single lump sum with a one-line description is not a quote. It is a number, and a number tells you nothing about whether the project is well understood. Ask the provider to break it down and watch how they respond, because a good one will happily explain the parts while a weak one will resist. You should be able to read the quote and picture the project, who does what, when, and what you get at the end. If you cannot picture it, you do not yet understand what you are buying. Red flags worth walking away from. Some signals should end the conversation rather than start a negotiation. Pressure and urgency is one. Any suggestion that you must decide now before some deadline you have not verified, because a real opportunity survives you checking it. Guarantees are another. If a provider assures you that approval is certain, they are promising something that is not theirs to promise, and you should ask yourself what else they are willing to say. Vagueness about scope after several conversations is a red flag, because by then it should be getting clearer, not blurrier. Reluctance to give references, or references who only speak in generalities, is a red flag. And anything that asks you to be less than fully accurate in your paperwork is not a red flag. It is the end of the discussion. None of these mean the provider is dishonest, but all of them mean the risk has moved to you and you do not have to accept it. Who owns the outcome? Underneath all of this sits one principle that keeps you safe. Whatever a provider says, promises, or handles on your behalf, the responsibility for your application and your project remains yours. Your business signs it, your business is accountable for it, and your business lives with the result. A provider can advise, build, and deliver, but they cannot transfer that ownership to themselves, no matter how the arrangement is described. So never let helpfulness slide into you not knowing what has been submitted in your name. Read what goes out, understand what you are agreeing to, and keep your own copy of everything. This is not suspicion, it is simply what ownership means. The best providers actively want you engaged because engaged clients make better projects, and any provider who prefers you uninvolved has an interest that is not yours. A closing thought. So here is the way to hold this decision. The provider you choose matters more than the form you fill in, so choose deliberately. Write your problem down before you talk to anyone. Check the official channels for how providers fit the scheme you are considering, and be wary of anyone who leads with the funding rather than the work. Ask for evidence, call the references, and make the period after go live part of the conversation. Compare more than one, read the quote like a contract, and walk away from pressure, guarantees, and vagueness. Above all, remember that the outcome is yours to own. Remember too that everything here is general and educational. We are not a government agency, we are not affiliated with or endorsed by anyone, and we do not recommend any provider. Scheme rules about providers change over time, so confirm what applies to you on gobusiness.gov.sg before you commit. If this helped you see the decision more clearly, subscribe for more plain English Singapore grant explainers, and we will keep making the process a little less daunting, one decision at a time.